Frontier research is about curiosity, courage, and community. And today we are here to celebrate all three of these. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome as well to those joining us online. My name is Bente Stallknecht, and I have the pleasure of serving as Dean at the Faculty of Health and Medical Sciences at the University of Copenhagen. It is a great pleasure to host Frontier Research in Denmark 2025. And let me begin with a special welcome to the European Research Council. We are truly honored to have you here in Denmark. Today is about ideas, exchange, and community. It's about celebrating the researchers who, with the support of ERC, are shaping the frontiers of knowledge and opening new pathways for innovation. This is a day for grantees across Denmark to showcase their work and inspire others. For the ERC to meet the Danish community and discuss impact, and for all of us to connect across disciplines and ideas. Since its creation, the ERC has become a beacon of scientific excellence. Here in Denmark, our researchers have risen to that challenge with remarkable success. More than 400 ERC grantees across the country, supported with over 700 million euros, have advanced discoveries and reached far beyond our borders. These projects not only strengthen Denmark's research ecosystem, they help build Europe's global leadership in science. At the core of the ERC lies a principle we deeply value in Denmark: freedom of science. The ERC empowers researchers to pursue bold, curiosity-driven ideas wherever they may lead. This is also the cornerstone of Denmark's academic tradition, a culture of independent inquiry, trust in excellence, and commitment to knowledge for society. Together, these principles make frontier research possible. History shows us again and again, this freedom is what leads the most transformative breakthroughs. As Dean, I place great value on creating the right environment for research at our faculty. Excellence requires more than resources. It requires trust, freedom, and also inclusion. We must ensure that talent can thrive regardless of gender, background, or perspective. Diversity in science is not only a question of fairness, it is a driver of excellence. Different voices and experiences bring new ideas, new questions, and new solutions. Both the ERC and the Danish universities share this commitment to an open, independent, and inclusive research culture where excellence can flourish. But today is not only about celebrating achievements, it's also about connections. This gathering brings ERC leadership together with Danish grantees, reviewers, universities, and the wider research community. It's a unique opportunity to share projects, spark conversations, and build collaborations across disciplines, institutions, and career stages. I encourage all of you to take advantage of this forum. Ask questions, exchange ideas, and meet people you may not otherwise encounter. And I hope the dialogues start here will continue long after today. Finally, let me stress that ERC depends on all of us, on outstanding applicants, on dedicated panel members and reviewers, and on strong institutions. Frontier science thrives when we work together. With these thoughts, it's now my great pleasure to hand the floor to our rector, Professor David Dreyer Lassen, himself and 1.5 ERC grantee, to share his reflections. So please, David.
Thank you, Bente. Maybe 1.25 is a better estimate. I will say a little bit about that in a few minutes. So I'll say something about the ERC from the perspective of a grant holder, a little bit of that, but also from the perspective of a research of a university leader as rector of the University of Copenhagen. Why it's important, why perspective maybe change on a few accounts on these ERC grants. But first, very briefly, let me just tell you that. So my first experience with the ERC was not getting a grant. So I applied some 15 years ago for a very, very nice project, I think. In the end, I ended up on a waiting list. It was the year of the volcano. Some of you will remember. It was a very stressing year, and I ended up not getting funded. I did get funded, though, with parts of that project in the Danish Research Council system, which is also an important part of this. And then in 2 years' time, I did get my first. It was called at the time an ERC starting grant. It was what we would now call a consolidated grant, because it was before those were split into two. What I remember most, I have to say, about the experience, and it may have changed, is that you get an email saying there's news about your application, and then it takes 10 to 15 minutes to log into the system, and your pulse is racing like crazy. And then, sometimes the decision is nice, sometimes it's not so nice. But it's, and I was, the first time I was in the US on a bad Wi-Fi, so it was really an excruciating experience. But there we are. We know all about well-functioning electronic systems at the University of Copenhagen, so apology accepted on that. Maybe my experience, so the quarters, I was co-PI on an ERC advanced grant that actually finished last Tuesday, was the last day of money, ran out on October 1st, and that was a very interesting experience also. And an example of something, in many ways, a pretty crazy project, I have to say, bridging data science, network science, sociology, and anthropology in ways that would probably be hard to get funded, I think, in most national systems. And we were very grateful for that. It ended up in many ways being programmatic in what we now call the political economy of attention. I was not that big part of it because I transitioned into admin. But we did have a very, very, very good final day of the project where we presented the top 25 papers that were produced in one slide, 3 minutes. It was, and it spans, I think, 6 years because of the COVID crisis. So a very, very rewarding experience. And actually, there did come a spin out of the project based on 2 people from anthropology. So we were very proud of that as well. Now, as the rector now of the University of Copenhagen, I cannot stress the importance, of course, of ERCs enough. It was said about Danish research in a report by 2 Swedish scholars of science some 15 years ago, that Danish research is quietly brilliant. And while the brilliant part is something that we, of course, enjoy very much, the quiet part is less good, because it means that we don't get the recognition and we don't attract the talent that we might be able to attract, given that we have such a strong research community. And here the ERC, as serving as a common currency, is actually a very good window for us to showcase the abilities of the Danish research community, because you can basically see how many ERCs do we get in Denmark, how many Marie Curie, etc. And that is an easily translatable metric rather than many of the other things that we tend to look at when we look at the university quality. So we are seeing an uptick in people who actually know us based on our ERC performance, which of course makes it even more important that people do apply and reapply, and we are very grateful for the time that all of you spend on that, certainly. So maybe one point which is important also is that so many of you will be invited to talk about your experiences as a grant holder. How did you get how did you get your grant talk, which is really important. And what I said before by starting out by saying that I didn't get a grant, turns out to be a really important thing to say to young people, because many of them think that CVs are a measure of your success. The CVs of failures have not really caught on, even though some people tried to do it some years ago. But letting people know, the young, smart people, that it's not a linear process all the time. And it is actually important. Just because you get a rejection, of course, from a journal, but certainly also from the ERC, does not mean that you shouldn't try again. So please help us spread that message as well. The final thing, which is the most rectoral thing I can say today, is that every year we have, the accountants go through our systems and our books at the University of Copenhagen. They have one remark every year, and that is, people don't keep up with the timesheets. And it's serious business, because if you don't do that, if you end up on the bad list of the commission, it can actually cost the university a ton of money. And it's not, we can survive having a remark made by our accountants every year. It's not that. But I think it is at a broader point. We can all agree that this or that system is maybe less ideal for reporting. But it is as part of the greater commitment that we do get the money, and we should, comply with the rules. So I'm bringing you the message from our university director and all university directors in Denmark, that please to make sure that you comply with the timesheet requirements. So on that happy note, I'm happy to give the floor to Annemarie Falktoft, Deputy Director of the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. As David said, I am Annemarie Falktoft. I'm the Deputy Director General of the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Science. I am not an ERC grantee, so my talk here will be less personal, but very much deeply coming from the heart. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests from the European and Danish research community, dear friends of the European Research Council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to open this significant and timely conference on the European Research Council and frontier research in Denmark. Thanks to the organizers, University of Copenhagen and the European Research Council, for planning this important and ambitious event. In Denmark, we are true friends and supporters of the ERC, and we take pride in the fact that we have been so from before the ERC was even a reality. As you probably know, the ERC was set up in 2007. Before it could open its first calls, years of lobbying and political negotiations took place. During the Danish EU presidency in 2002, Denmark supported the idea by organizing a conference named "Do We Need a European Research Council?" I think we all here today agree that the answer to that question is a big yes. A European Research Council was indeed what Europe needed. To us, the ERC is one of Europe's greatest successes. It has become a household brand name the world over, a brand signifying excellent science. An ERC grant is a seal of approval that defines one's career as a researcher. If you as a researcher receive an ERC grant, this will truly change your research career. Researchers enter a different league when they receive an ERC grant. Because ERC grants last for 5 years, they provide researchers with enough time to immerse themselves completely in a topic of their very own choice. It provides the time to set up an excellent research team around their research idea. And an ERC grant often makes it easier to obtain funding from other sources as well. I am certain that we will hear this narrative repeated from several of the ERC grantees who will speak here later today. The figures back up the popularity of the ERC brand. The ERC has up until now funded excellent and truly groundbreaking research by supporting more than 10,000 researchers across Europe. This has resulted in more than 200,000 peer-reviewed articles, as well as 14 Nobel Prizes. Importantly, the ERC has also contributed to over 2,200 patents, and over 400 startups have been created by ERC grantees. Indeed impressive. All in all, the impressive facts of the ERC prove that Europe really needed a European Research Council. And this need has definitely not become less urgent over time. These numbers show that an investment in excellent bottom-up research is an investment in innovation for the common good of Europe. It is truly a backbone of competitiveness. A point of view recently supported by Mario Draghi in his much-renowned report on European competitiveness, where he points out that the European pipeline from innovation to commercialization is too weak, as we have all heard. This results in Europe having fewer knowledge-based startup companies delivering impact and innovation for the common good than other regions worldwide. The ERC must be strengthened to support this, Draghi suggested. The ERC is well suited to do so. ERC has succeeded with maintaining its core values while evolving in step with the times. For instance, with a timely focus on societal impact. In its essence, the ERC has thankfully not changed significantly since it opened its first call in 2007. It is crucial that the ERC grants are only given to the very best researchers for excellent research. An ERC grant must remain synonymous with international prestige. There is no excellent innovation without excellent science. To me, the ERC is perhaps the best example of how the EU can add value by providing a tool that no member state can provide alone. Because the ERC is more than grant money. It is a shared workroom where the best ideas across Europe and the world are grown, and where the best scientists compete and collaborate. And if I may modestly add, we are indeed very proud of the Danish share of ERC grant holders, as has also been mentioned earlier here today. On behalf of the Danish EU presidency, we indeed look forward to continue working on further developing the opportunities for researchers under the ERC. And to judge by the European Commission's recent proposal for the next Horizon Europe, maybe even with a higher budget. I thank you all for your participation here today, and I wish you all a very good conference. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank our rector for sharing how he perceived the ERC grants to be very important for showcasing research quality, and also himself, David, his rewarding experience of being an ERC grantee. And thank you also so much, Annemarie, for saying that we are true friends and supporters of ERC in Denmark, and that the ERC is a great success. So now we come to our first session. So it's called Frontier Research in Denmark. And this is where we hear directly from ERC grantees across Denmark, presenting their research and reflecting on how ERC funding has shaped their work and their careers. And it is my great pleasure to hand over to our moderator, Professor Søren Hauberg, ambassador for the ERC, who will guide us through the keynote and the short talks. Please.
So, thank you so much. As mentioned, I'm an ambassador, and this is a new thing. It was made up earlier this year. So it's a reasonable question to ask, what does it mean to be an ambassador for the ERC? And really, we're a team of international ambassadors. We're all volunteers. We have no formal role. We really only speak on our own behalves. And we do this because we absolutely love the ERC. We're all grantees who have been overwhelmed by the impact that the ERC has had on both our lives and on our research. And in that sense, perhaps the title ambassador is slightly misleading. I prefer to think of it as I'm a cheerleader for the ERC. You won't see me doing dances. I don't have the physique for that. But nonetheless, that's how I perceive this role, is that we're a group of people scattered around Europe who will stand up for the ERC anytime we're called upon to do this. This is also an invitation to you. If you need a cheerleader, do feel free to call upon us. That's why we're here. One of the reasons we choose to do this, spend our valuable time that we could be dedicating to research, is we absolutely, we absolutely cherish this notion of the high standards of the ERC. This thing that it's all based on an extremely thorough, world-leading peer review system that sort of selects the best of the best and gives them the best opportunities. And what we're going to do in this session is we're going to see presentations from the best of the best, who will tell us about their journey and how the ERC has guided them through their lives. The way it will structurally work is that we're going to have a series of talks, and at the very end, we'll have a Q&A session. So, if you have a question for the speakers, jot them down. There'll be ample opportunity to debate with them at the end. We'll gather them all up in this row of seats. And with that note, I would like to introduce the first speaker of the session, which is Peter Lodahl from the Niels Bohr Institute at the University of Copenhagen, a field leader of quantum research, and a dual grantee, consolidator grantee, advanced grantee, and I'd like to welcome you on the podium.
Thank you, Søren. Pleasure to be here. Let's go quantum. So we are in Copenhagen. So we're all hyped about quantum, and we somehow got in fashion. And I must say, it was not always like this. And actually, ERC instrument has been one of the reasons that we are here today and maybe can be hyped and have something to be hyped about. Let's hope that hype doesn't get too crazy. But I will tell you about the journey that I've experienced myself from ERC grantee and all the way to becoming a quantum entrepreneur. Take you a little back to where it all started. My independent research career started in 2005 when I returned to Denmark, and it was actually Jørgen Vam, who was sitting right there, who gave me a chance to get in and start do something new in the Danish ecosystem. And that was about how to interact light and matter with each other. So it was very, very fundamental questions. How does light and matter interact with each other at the most fundamental level of single photons and single emitters? Can we actually control these physics processes if we embed these emitters inside intricate photonic nanostructures? That's what you're seeing here, some micrometer, tiny, tiny length scale, tiny, tiny nanostructures that I want to put single atoms into in order to control light-matter interaction. And there's a lot of physics on this platform, and I was really intrigued about that physics. Can I understand it? Can I describe it? Can I do theory on it? And can I use that understanding to control light-matter interaction? And of course, does it work? Can we build up a lab? And can we make these devices? And can we get stuff to really work in the lab? And of course, it's always difficult to put yourself back in the head of your young self 20 years ago. But I think I was also thinking back then, could this actually be useful for something? I think it was a tiny little thing in the back of my head. It's certainly not why I started this, but I think that has been there all the way through. Could that be building blocks for something really advanced? So fast forward to today, we have now the world's leading deterministic source of single photons. That's what you see on this image here. This is a device where I push a button. That means I put in a laser pulse, and it emits one photon, the fundamental constituent of light. And I push the button again, and it emits another photon, and I collect all these photons with these intricate photonic nanostructures. there are very deep reasons for that the device looks like it does, and lots of hard work going into this platform. But in a nutshell, this is what we have been developing over these past 20 years. And some people say you must have been very lazy. Is it really all what you did in all these 20 years? And I said, no, we have actually been working really hard because it's a very deep physics question of understanding all the physical processes here and also get it to work. And it's more than just emitting and collecting single photons. There are good and bad photons and high qubit fidelity. Many, many things that I can talk forever about if you give me the chance. Don't worry, I won't start. But there are really, really many details on this. And I think it's that knowledge that also makes us successful on the entrepreneur side of things. It's that knowledge that we're building on up today that is a commercial opportunity of Sparrow Quantum of today. Details about the, breakthroughs. Breakthroughs. There was a specific number that started to become really, really high. It's called the beta factor, the lower experimental bound of 98.4. That is a quality or the efficiency, the intrinsic efficiency of the source. That was a physics question that we were diving into. How high could that number be? What are the fundamental processes that limits that number? And how well does it work in practice? And it was really these kind of questions we were diving into. And in this process, things really starts to also, work out that there's much more in it than just this efficiency, as I was saying before. So we have been building up that knowledge. We have been quite stubborn also, focusing on this specific platform, being world champs on this specific platform. And I think that has been a learning lesson also for me personally, that okay, if you want to be good at something, you have to be stubborn and you have to stick to it. But you, of course, also need to have the opportunities and the funding mechanisms and the patience in the system in order to be able to do that. And I think that's in a nutshell what we have been able to do. We have also been building up patent portfolios on this, and of course do that much more strategically and serious nowadays in the company. I was, I forgot to say, but I came from abroad. I'm Danish, but I was abroad at Caltech first, and then in the Netherlands afterwards. And I came back there in 2005 with these ideas of can we control light-matter interaction, and can we do some exciting physics, and based on some work I had been doing there during my postdoc. Very dirty experiment, very early type of experiments that we did that back then, and this is what we really were building on top of in the years to come. So my funding history, and it's not just because I'm at an ERC event here, but the ERC instrument has been absolutely instrumental for our building up our research group. We are an experimental quantum group. That means we require a lot of infrastructure. We're very, very costly. Cryostats, nanofabrication tools. So that's a prerequisite for being competitive in what I'm doing. When I came back to Denmark, fun guy, lots of energy. Let's give him some grants, and I think I was doing really well in the beginning. And then I was so lucky to get an ERC grant in 2010. It was also a consolidator grant, like what David was explaining before. It was separated in starting and consolidator, and all solid-state quantum electrodynamics and photonic quizzes, all quantum. So for me, this was a very, very important grant. Of course, the money, but also actually it's an excellent stamp internationally. Also, that you can see you have that ERC grant. You're taken seriously internationally. Also, I think I saw that very much as a young group leader, the value of that. Then further down, we become more and more expensive because the stuff becomes more and more complicated. The experiments become more and more complicated. And actually around the time there of 2015, I was struggling a little bit. It was 10 years after I started the group. They had seen me waving my hands and talking about quantum dots and say, cool, but hasn't he said that before? And what's new? And shouldn't, right. I was struggling a little bit to get funding, essentially. We were actually a little bit in crisis in terms of could we keep this group running. And we were very frustrated. I was very frustrated because I thought we were doing extremely well in research-wise, and we had really a lot of exciting opportunities. And there I was so lucky to get an ERC advance grant back in 2015 called Scale. And that was maybe the grant that I didn't of the many I applied for. That was the least one I thought I would get. And I was even told, you never get it, you're too young and you're too green and you're too whatever. But I was really lucky also to get this grant. I think back then I was the youngest Dane to get an ERC advance grant. And I think for me this was really saving the group essentially. I was already starting to think about should we move abroad, and my wife is not Danish, and we were talking. But this was really the moment that saved us essentially and saved that activity. Then other grants came. The Innovation Fund Denmark was an early quantum innovation initiative called QBIS that I was director of. I got an ERC proof of concept grant 2017, and then I've also been so lucky to lead. Dorte is here, the Danish National Research Foundation Center of Excellence, HiQ, that started in 2018, and this is a 10-year funding program for fundamental research that has been absolutely instrumental. And I'm also leading a grant from the Novo Nordisk Foundation for solid-state quantum simulators. So this 2015 moment was an essential one for us to get over the barrier where we say, okay, we should continue this research. It's worthwhile. I forgot to say that actually today I'm on leave from my university position. I'm still a professor at the Niels Bohr Institute, but I'm actually full-time, or 70% of my time in the company, Sparrow Quantum. So I've taken that leap out to the commercial world also meaning that I'm not leading the Center of Excellence anymore, HiQ, but my colleague Anders Sørensen has been taking over that role. So details, this number I mentioned already about the 98.4% was really a decisive moment of understanding, hey, I can enhance light-matter interaction to that degree to that level. That means it becomes technology. That means it becomes much more than just fundamental fun physics. This was a moment where Sparrow, essentially the idea of Sparrow, was launched, and that was a direct outcome of All Quantum, this ERC starting grant proposal that I mentioned. And this is one of my political one-liners. I think for us at least, there has been no free lunch in terms of quantum technology. I'll tell you about Sparrow in a second. I think the value of Sparrow, the reason that investors are pouring a lot of money into us and are excited about our technology, the reason that we have very strong traction in people that want to exploit our technology for building really advanced quantum technology, that's because we are very deep. We understand the building blocks. I mean, you can blow this stuff a lot when you talk to really high level quantum guys if you don't understand what you're talking about. I was like, what on earth? I mean, I said decoherence and he didn't understand what I was saying. And then you don't get a second chance. It's very early technology. That's why crazy physicists like myself are still engaged in taking the right decisions in how are we going to scale this technology up. And it's so deep tech. So our credibility is very much provided by the 20 years of fundamental research, really understanding these quantum dot building blocks and the routes forward. How am I going to engineer this moving forward? What engineering paths am I going to do? It's not physicists that are going to build technology, obviously, but we need to guide what engineering paths. If you just start to engineer, build, put it in boxes, I mean, you will do something wrong on the really advanced technology we are talking about here. So today, Sparrow is a real company. We are about 45 employees. We have a product. So for us, it has been really important to get out on the market. That's something that a guy like me would usually not think of. I just want to build some cool technology. But how am I going to make that technology useful in the real world? Get it out in the hands of the people, of the end users. Crazy guy waving his hand, talking about how brilliant a single photon source he has. Fun. exciting, but nothing beats if you can put it out in the hands of an end user, and he or she will say, indeed, Sparrow is producing the best single photon sources in the world. And by the way, what they told me how I should use it was actually true. They know what they're talking about, these guys. This has been the entrance for us in Sparrow. Get a product out on the market, sell the chips, that's our specialty, but also put that chip into a rack so that we have it's mounted inside a cryostat. There's a laser that controls it. It's and some electronics and some filtering, some optics. So a full, what we call a plug-and-play single photon source system. That's solutions that we have already built. Is the market there? Is that huge business? Well, maybe. I can say we have more customers that we have production capacity, and then any business guy would say, throw everything you have, start produce like crazy, and out with you guys, physicists, with all your crazy ideas, because we need to focus on the customers. And I think we need to do two things when building a quantum startup here. There's some intrinsic duality in a quantum startup. We need the customers, this traction, this validation of the technology. You learn so much in the company from these sales about your customers, and building up a team that can actually do that. But if you think that your product is done, and it's just about putting it in boxes and selling more of them, you haven't understood quantum technology. It's very, very early technology. So that's where the duality comes in. I need to produce, sell, but I also need to make sure that we have the best product not only today, but also tomorrow and in a year from now. I need to be innovative. I need to build an innovation team that can remain at the forefront. And that's in a nutshell what we are trying to do at Sparrow. Products, yeah. Customers, yes. Huge revenue based on that product. Too early to say because it's a very expensive product. Cost down, all these kind of things, but certainly also next generation products. So who are our customers? Other research teams, but also actually end users of quantum computers. Building quantum computers based on photons is an area that is gaining a lot of traction. We have this deterministic technology that is a new kid on the block, new building block for that kind of technology. And we have actually already demonstrated a full system together with a partner called Orca Compute in UK that sells what's called, it's not a full quantum computer, it's an AI machine that is boosted by quantum correlations. So you can say the quantum part is a co-processor of a supercompute AI machine. And that's a market that Orca is selling into and where we are delivering our racks, so our full plug-and-play solutions already today. And it's about the generations of technology. It's about the generations of computers. Orca is selling their PT1 system today, but there will also be generations in the years to come where they become more and more complex. And that's where our opportunity gets in, and where our strength is. We raised a lot of money in Sparrow, so this was a capital investment round probably about half a year ago of 21 million euro, which in Denmark is really a lot of money, something we're proud of, and also will really take us to the next level of becoming a scale-up in quantum technology, hardware, and hopefully keeping it in Europe and in Denmark. I can talk a lot about these kind of things, but I don't know how much time do I actually have. I have 5 minutes. Okay. Maybe a little bit about what we are using, what we'll be using this money for. I think I said it already. So the production, consolidating the production. It gets more and more professional when you have customers down the line, obviously, and you are consolidating the actual production, but also advancing the next generation chip technology. So that's where this R&D side of things comes in very, very naturally as part of the company. And by the way, supporting also the university collaboration. To me, not just because I'm a university professor and like the Niels Bohr Institute and feel for it and have excellent colleagues, but it's also really a competitive advantage for company like Sparrow that we have to be very modest about, or humble about, that the value has to a very large extent been generated in the academic setting by all these brilliant researchers that have been working on this over the years. That's what we are standing on. So we can give back in Sparrow also to that environment, and why not give back to that environment? Because remaining excellent scientific results coming out from that environment is showcasing Sparrow's technology big time. So often we talk about, it's a different interest here. I don't think it's difficult at all to set up a construction here where it's clear that we have complementary interests. At the university side of things, when I have my university hat on, I educate people and I publish papers, and we take some patents. In the business, we are building the products, we are engineering the technology, we are engaging these big strategic partnerships to be engaged in our technology. And we benefit from, we don't publish papers, we don't have time to publish papers, but we love to see beautiful papers being written with our technology, because that showcases our technology. If you think you have the best source and just have it in the basement and nobody's using it, I mean, this technology will never go anywhere. So I see lots of complementary, good synergy between the academic activities. And I can, with my commercial hat on, also really help supporting the infrastructure here at university, which is always a hard part for what has been. Yes, okay, that took a long time on this slide. I'll wrap up. So I can support the infrastructure also. There's mutual benefit of infrastructure. I will just very briefly saying, okay, I talked about single photon source. There's much more exciting physics that you can do on this platform. It's a light matter interface. I can start to do photon-photon interaction, getting single photons to non-linear interact with each other. And a lot of exciting physics we have been doing on this. We can start to produce not just single photons, but actually entangled photons. Now I want to spit out something deterministically where the photons are non-locally entangled with each other. That's a much, much more powerful resource than just single photons. And exploiting a spin inside the quantum dot to do that entanglement generation, proof of concept, experiments in the research lab, lots of exciting stuff, and a commercial opportunity. It's the same devices, you're just operating with small tweaks, but you're just operating them slightly differently to do these much more advanced things. So it's not just a dumb source of single photons, it's really a light matter interface. And scaling up, I told you about SCALE, the ERC advanced grant that was called SCALE. That's about taking multiple of these quantum dots, and here you just see some recent experiments. I noticed this is from 2023, so I think SCALE was 2015 to 2020. So, I mean, it was probably a little bit of back, took a little longer than I was probably optimistic when I wrote that advanced grant. But lots of exciting opportunities in scaling up to multiple quantum dots. And then I should always remember to acknowledge the real people, as I call them. You know, I'm just a guy waving and talking, but this huge team that over the many years, first at DTU where I started, and then since 2011 I was hired to the Niels Bohr Institute. HiQ is a center of excellence. You see some of my senior colleagues. Søren, I should in particular emphasize. He took over leading HiQ, the DNF Center of Excellence, after I got into my midlife crisis and suddenly had to, become a quantum entrepreneur. And I'm still part of the center, but he's leading it. Thank you very much.
Now we have our next speaker is Anja Groth from the Danish Cancer Institute and the University of Copenhagen. She's one of the rare triple grantees starting Consolidator Advanced. And yeah, I look forward to the talk.
Thank you very much. So it's a great pleasure to be here to talk to you about our research in epigenetic cell memory. And I'm waiting a little bit for my slides here. Yes, thank you very much. So what is epigenetic cell memory? Epigenetic cell memory is really about how cells remember their identity and pass it on to their daughter cells. so that every time a cell in our body divides, it will either make 2 new identical cells, or it will undergo a change in cell identity, such as what we have during development of the many different cell types in our body. If it doesn't follow either of these paths, then we can have harmful gain or loss of function, which is what we see in cancer and in aging. This is really a fundamental process for human health, because we have, a huge number of cell divisions that takes place through human lifetime, both in the early development, but also in adult organisms to ensure tissue renewal that is counteracting aging. And just while you're sitting and listening to what I'm saying, you'll have billions of new cells produced. So for these cells to really remain true to their functions, it's essential that there is transmission of the stable genetic information, which is the same in all of our cells, but also transmission of the acquired epigenetic information, which is cell type specific. So what is epigenetic information? We talk about the epigenome, which is the organization of DNA into chromatin. So chromatin organizes about 2 meters of DNA in the cell nucleus. It's a structure of DNA and proteins. And it governs gene expression and genome stability. And you can view it as a layer of information on top of the DNA, which is regulating cell identity and cell fate. So while we understand in detail how DNA is copied and transmitted to our daughter cells, we actually don't understand very well how epigenomes are inherited. And so this is really a fundamental knowledge gap for development, disease, and aging. And this was the question that I was interested in working on when I started my laboratory back in 2008, actually coming back from my postdoc in France with Geneviève Almouchny, who is now sitting here as part of the ERC scientific panel. So what my lab is interested in is really the nucleosomes, because they're super rich in information. So the nucleosomes are sort of these beads on the string. They consist of histone proteins around which DNA is wrapped. And these histones can be modified by a large variety of chemical groups, which really this is really what you could call information here. So what we wanted to address in my lab was to understand how is chromatin replicated when cells divide, and how is information in these histone proteins inherited. And so at the time we started this, there was actually very few people working on this question. And so it was kind of part of starting a new research field, or you could say actually reviving a research field, because people had been looking at that, but probably about 30 to 40 years earlier. And so I've been very fortunate to have had ERC funding for a large part of my career in order to sort of dive into these fundamental questions. And this has been instrumental for opening up this area. And the field of chromatin replication is now a thriving area with many labs working on it across the world. And so what we were able to do with the support of an ERC starting grant was really to develop enabling technologies and define the key principles for the process. With the support of a consolidator grant, we could provide the first insight into the molecular mechanisms and also show causality. And most recently, we were awarded an ERC advanced grant to now take a step back and seek to understand inheritance and information flow across chromatin scales, which is what we believe makes inheritance robust. So along the way, I've also sort of progressed professionally from running my own research group into becoming a program director as part of the leadership of the Center for Protein Research here also at University of Copenhagen. And most recently, I've started a national center for epigenetic cell memory at the Danish Cancer Society. And of course, all our work would have not been possible with all the young, talented scientists that have been working in the lab over the years. And I'm really happy that 9 of them are now running their own independent labs, many working on chromatin replication and many still working here in Europe. Also, over this time, we've had one spin-out company, Anchorin Therapeutics, which I've also been part of leading. We had to close Anchorin, but we are absolutely ready to start and try up again later on. And I should also acknowledge funding from the many other national and international sources that have been critical for our work. So a little bit more diving into the science. So what have we discovered? So first I want to highlight the importance of this technology. So making new technology that has kind of been critical for opening the field. So what we were able to do was develop technology that allows us to look at chromatin replication as it happens in cells. So we are basically pulse labeling the newly replicated chromatin, pulling it out and analyzing it by genomics and proteomics technologies. And because we can chase this pulse, we can basically follow in time how these chromatin landscapes mature and develop with very high temporal resolution. And we call these technologies repliomics. And using these repliomics, we've been able to identify some of the key principles for transmission of histone information. So we now know that this information actually survives DNA replication because there is a very accurate recycling of these proteins with their information and distribution of them to both of the daughter strands. In addition, we know we have these new histones coming in. So this is because you have the double amount of DNA, so you need the double amount of these nucleosomes. And that actually is diluting the information in chromatin. And it's followed by a very complex restoration process where these new histones now become similar to the old ones with all their different chemical modifications. And so we now know that this restoration process is really surprisingly slow, which is really in contrast to what was originally thought and was the textbook view. And we believe that this provides a source of plasticity in early development, but also a vulnerability later in life associated with aging and cancer. And this is something that we're still working on. A major breakthrough really came from the first insight we had into the copying machine. And it was very surprising because it actually turns out that there's one copy machine doing two jobs. So it's actually the replication proteins, the proteins that copy DNA, that also have evolved an ability to bind these histones and secure their transmission to the two daughter strands. So this is basically integrating genetic and epigenetic inheritance in one machine. And we were able to identify one of the first of such proteins and make mutations in it so that just 2 amino acid changes here so that it no longer binds these histones. And that totally redirects this inheritance pattern so that now all the information flows to only one DNA strand and therefore mainly to one of the daughter cells. So you have asymmetric inheritance. And when we now looked in these cells, what was the phenotype? It turns out that these cells can indeed, they can't differentiate anymore. They cannot maintain their proper identity. And they do indeed have harmful gain and loss of functionality, which really demonstrated that inheritance of these histones is critical for cells to maintain their correct identity every time they divide. And this process is really, as I said, underpinning both development but also lifelong health, because we know that epigenome alterations are driving aging and cancer. And this is an area that's still, really very active in research and many people are working on it across the world. And we are very excited about the work we are doing now with the advanced grant. But because of time, I will not talk more about the science. I will just highlight and again say, so our scientific advances has really would not have been possible had we not had ERC funding. And what I think have been particularly important for us is that ERC support is a bottom-up instrument. So this is really important if you think about opening a new research area, because obviously strategic funding would not prioritize new areas in that way. Also, as been mentioned, the large size and the long term of these grants have been critical because we had to develop new technology in order to address the scientific challenges in the field. And then it's been mentioned also that this is really a seal of excellence. It is important for recognition, I think, worldwide, but also it has certainly also been important, I'm sure, for national funding. And then at the end, I also want to say that I think the ERC has an extremely important role in giving all us European scientists a bit of a common identity. So I think we are all extremely proud of the ERC and this very ambitious funding scheme. We are very proud to contribute also to the rigorous evaluations and assessments of the ERC. And I think this is also a very important function of the ERC. And so at the end, I just want to say thank you very much to all the people who have evaluated our work over the times, the panels, the reviewers, and the ERC for the trust and support. And thank you for your time. Thank you.
Now, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Frede Blåbjerg, professor at Aalborg University, dual grantee, advanced and synergy, and also a 7-time panel member of the ERC, and I think we're all very grateful for that effort.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation to come here and speak a little bit about my field and also a little bit reflections on ERC. So what I will, let's say, start with is a little bit the project I was granted in 2013. What was the motivation to look at that? And then I will try to show you which impact this has given into the society. And then at the end, I will say a little bit about what is going to happen next in my career, among a few things, because daily I'm also co-PI of one of the 4 Danish pioneer centers, where we have a grant for 13 years trying to, let's say, move things in terms of power to X and material discovery. I think I have the longest title in ERC history, you can see, but it was taken down to harmony, and this is a beautiful, let's say, word to have, and I think after the presentation you'll see why we want harmony. And the first thing, this is about electrical engineering, and electrical engineering we are extremely, let's say, careful about that every day we have, let's say, we have light in our bulbs and the infrastructure is running all the time. So we should be sure when we connect things into the power system that everything is in harmony and is reliable. And we expect it 24/7, every day, every minute, every second, every millisecond, and so on. What is happening, and this is my research field, is that we are, let's say, introducing with benefit new technology which can make things more easy to integrate into the grid, for example, renewables. We are introducing technology to control processes, for example, the lights and so on, so we get better performance, but we also get higher efficiency and we thereby save energy. And this is a little bit illustrated here. To the left is the source, to the right are some consumers. In between we come with electronic technology which can do magic, I think, and in that way, let's say, do what we like to do. But this is not without penalty, because what we are doing by that is we are introducing a lot of components into our power system, and we have to really be careful about this and understand what is the consequences. So after I have been the dean until 2010, I was thinking, okay, what is my, let's say, dream project to attack? And then I draw a figure like this and concluded we can get problems here. And of course, you are not electrical engineers. I am not in all the other fields, but I draw here this one, and this was, let's say, attached to my advanced grant in 2012, where you can see sources which are photovoltaics, wind. There are also electrical vehicles. Remember, this is 2012. On the other side, we have the grid, we have different loads and so on. And we put that together, we come with components, which are those components we have in power electronics, we have cables and so on. And I could see for myself, if we are not having better tools, we are not going to make the mission that the energy system should be reliable, and it should also, let's say, be able to integrate future technologies to make the society much better. And we already at that time had indication that if we were not careful, then they could interact, and then they would stop, because otherwise they would be damaged. This was the time, the circle, when I did the application. This is an indication about how much renewable we have installed since then, and this is in gigawatt. Now the numbers are not there. So of course, this was a timely let's say, time to address this in order to be sure that we are able, let's say, to handle this integration. So what is happening for the moment, let's say, thanks for different things. One is that we can do the energy system more efficient. A second is we can make it more sustainable, is that we are substituting big power plants, you can see to the left here, down with, let's say, sources which are wind, it's photovoltaics and so on, which are based, let's say, on electronic things. And we are creating a power system where we just have a few red dots, like you can see here, with thousands, maybe 10,000, 100,000 of dots, which are producing electricity into the power system. And that is really increasing, let's say, the complexity of the whole thing. If we look a little bit more into the future about, let's say, the importance of being able to master this, then I have taken this drawing from, let's say, from one organization saying what is needed in the transformation of the energy system in order to keep this 1.5 degrees C temperature rise, which yesterday was mentioned. We have lost that battle. But just to illustrate, how can we technically do the energy system so we are able to fulfill this 1.5 degree? To the left, you can see how the primary energy is today, or 2018 is a little bit moved a little bit. To the right, you can see the solution where we then can look into the mirror and say to the next generation, we have solved the problem. And in that case, you can see that the electricity, which is, let's say, the things we have in focus here, we are moving that from 21% to 51%. You can also see other sources where we need electricity. So we are moving the, let's say, the energy system from being a fossil fuel-based system to an electrical-based system. Whether we are ending there or not, I'm quite sure we will come very, very close to this, maybe not in 2050, but it's just showing the importance of being able to master, let's say, this technology we are putting into the system. Now, electrical engineers, they know, of course, something about windings, magnetics, and so on, and that we are able, by, let's say, a generator to generate sinusoidal voltages, and they run with 50 hertz or 60 hertz, depending on where you are in the standard grid. And in order to, let's say, analyze this so we are sure things are, let's say, stable all the time, we are typically looking at different frequencies. We have to understand what happens at different frequencies. If we understand this in the control system, we have things under control, and we get very, very nice sinusoidal voltages out, and you have, let's say, light in the bulbs. Now we come with our technology. And just to illustrate which frequencies now are under concern, and you can see this was from 0.1 hertz to 1 hertz. We come now with the technology, and now we have a much wider frequency range where we have to be sure that the power system is always stable. And this we have to analyze step by step in order, let's say, to be sure that we are on the right pace. And you can see here, this is much more wide spectrum, and that means it becomes also more complicated because typically we have a lot of phenomena which are difficult to describe. Here is illustrated, let's say, the beauty of the technology, let's say, I have been working with for 30 years or something like that, but also, and the possibilities, but also where, let's say, the alert is coming. Up here, this is the hardware part. You have the line here. Here we have come with our power electronics. We have some passive components. So this is a little bit like this beautiful synchronous generator you have. The synchronous generator is there, it's reacting, we can describe that. But what is happening with the power electronics is that we have a lot of control loops in order to control the current we are feeding into the system, in order to keep the voltage, in order to manage the power which is produced by the sources. So that gives us, let's say, a control structure, let's say, where we are in control of what is going to happen. And that's a different thing, that all things are now moved into software. It's not just, let's say, physical components. But that gives us also opportunities. So just to illustrate, this is the control structure. I'm not going to, just to illustrate the different frequencies under alert can be seen in different parts of the control structure and so on. And if we look at how the power system is analyzed, the black illustrate what we normally do in terms of let's say, doing the mapping of uncertainties. But then what we come with there is the dynamics of the power electronics, and that we need to master. And that was the main reason for for this one here, that we want to, let's say, be able to make harmony in this, both look at what are the problems, how do we mitigate, and how do we do the control. And what we got out of it was really fundamental understanding about the things, also analysis methods, and we discovered some coupling between the system and the control, which were never seen before, and some could not really understand what was going on. They can understand that now. And we also did new control methods. What I would say was that after this, we formed a new research group, and I stepped out of this research group because there were many talented people, and this area is totally exploded in terms of activities. And then I redirected a little bit my part to something else. 3 things I will say. Now we can explain why a train in Swiss stopped without any explanation, why a wind farm, let's say, stopped at 20% load and suddenly some components were blowing up, why a PV farm stopped here and there, and we can do that. A second thing is that the power system community, based on what we did in the advanced grant in 2021, came with a definition of classification of power system stability, revisited and extended, based on the work we did. And I can tell you this is not easy to get that into the power system community, but they used 8 publications from this project to define the next, let's say, way to do it. And maybe the last thing I want to say is that we also did a spin out because we had methods now the utility could use in order to analyze their power system. And today I have got a new grant from ERC, thanks for that, where I, together with 3 German professors, are not looking at the high frequency part, but we are looking at the fundamental frequency in order maybe to reconfigure the power system to ensure that you also in 10 years have light in your bulbs 24/7. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Frede. And now our next speaker is Professor Ingvild Boe from the University of Southern Denmark, a holder of a consolidator and a proof of concept grant.
Thank you. So I just got promoted because actually a starting grant, not a consolidator, but that is the next step, hopefully. So thank you very much for this kind introduction and for inviting me to speak at this event. I will mainly use my time to talk about my ERC starting grant called Auto Norms and how this has shaped my career over the last 5 years. So as you see here, I was awarded this project in 2020. So it's kind of still ongoing because we are in an extension year due to the COVID pandemic that coincided with the start of the project. So we also have to be on our toes with regard to that. Right, so I will, just to give you a brief overview what I will cover. So I will review the project first of all, and then give you a sense of kind of what the outputs have been and what I think the main impact and dissemination has been over the past years. And then conclude with reflecting on my career. So this is the project, 5 years in one slide. You know, I was very economical with these slides. First of all, as you will see from this, we are transitioning to the social sciences. So I'm a political scientist by training, and this is a political science project. So what the project is really about is to investigate how weapon systems that integrate autonomous or AI technologies change international norms on the use of force. And for me, international norms can be, of course, of a legal nature, but they can also be of a social nature. And actually, these social norms have been the key kind of point of investigation for auto norms. So social norms are, for me, understandings of appropriateness that are often implicit, they are often not written down, and they're typically not publicly discussed. Kind of the example I always use in contexts such as this is that you're all now listening to me, you're sitting down, nobody's kind of standing up and trying to give a co-presentation, and you're basically all following a social norm at the moment. Nobody told you, nobody briefed you about this, but you've been socialized into behaving in this way, in this kind of setting. So I think these social norms are very important because they communicate what states consider to be appropriate behavior when it comes to also AI in the military domain. So an autonorms has then basically argued, and this is really the key argument of the project, that practices shape social norms. And specifically, we have looked at how practices of designing AI technologies, of training personnel for the use of these technologies, and of using them have shaped use of force norms over the course of quite a long time. And I think with this autonorms, the project tries to make conceptual and empirical contributions. So conceptually, this kind of idea that use of force norms mainly emerge in these kind of operational practices that are quite often performed kind of outside of the public eye. And this is kind of something that has normative consequence, is something that is entirely new and has been the project's really main theoretical innovation. And empirically, autonorms has then traced trajectories of these norms in relation to AI and weapon systems across 4 countries, China, Japan, Russia, and the US. As you can imagine from these countries, I mean, the project started in 2020. The world looked a bit different compared to what it looks like now. But I mean, I think that this has also been, of course, a wealth of empirical material for us to study. And I think much of this work really has led us to one core finding, which is that integrating AI into weapon systems has substantively reduced the exercise of human agency in decision-making over the use of force. So unfortunately, it's not good news, right? So that's the main finding. And somehow this diminished role of the human has become accepted as kind of appropriate and normal. I should add that this kind of outcome is not intentional. So it was never really the intention of the various actors involved in designing these systems and using these systems that what we want at the end basically is a diminished human role. But it is a result of the features and logics inherent to AI technologies and some kind of problematic assumptions about the nature of human-machine interaction that has led to this finding. Right. I'm trying to impress you now with some numbers. Maybe if you're a natural scientist, you're not very impressed, you know. But you keep in mind that this is a political science project, and it's also actually qualitative research, right? And we've had quite a small team, as is common for an ERC starting grant. So it was myself, 2 postdocs, and 1 PhD positions. And I think the focus really has been to kind of publish this kind of research in international relations journals, but then also I think as also if you're familiar with the AI agenda will know, it's also about interdisciplinarity, right? So we also really try to publish in kind of more legal journals or science and technology studies journals. And I think what these kind of numbers indicate for me is that I've been extremely lucky to be able to attract and recruit an exceptional team, because this is not just me, obviously. I'm not publishing 30 articles in 5 years, right? So this is a team effort. And for me, this has been the greatest joy of the ERC starting grant, really having the opportunity to work with a team and to develop things together with a team. Then, as you can probably tell, obviously the ERC for me is about pushing research frontiers in the academic context. But because of the high salience of the topic and its political currency, this has also made me want to go beyond just producing nicely peer-reviewed journal articles. So in my case, this took the form of various types of policy-oriented publications. So for example, autonorms has produced 4 major policy reports and also policy briefs, and these kind of serve 2 purposes for the project. So the reports were really about documenting in depth what do we actually know about the integration of AI into weapon systems, right? So it's kind of easy to say that this is happening, but what these reports were trying to do is kind of go through particular types of systems, such as air defense systems, first-person view drones, and AI decision support systems, and really try to find out on the basis of what is available in the public domain about what precisely do we know about AI, right? And the capabilities of these systems and the role of the humans in these systems. And this is, of course, not easy work, right? Because a lot of what is out there in the public domain is stuff that has been put out there by manufacturers of these systems who have a certain agenda, right? In terms of trying to sell their product. So they might describe something as AI that is maybe actually not really, you know? So there was a lot of kind of unpacking to do. But I think this kind of work really is the fundamental to the research that autonomous was then able to do, to really have a deep empirical basis for that. And then the second point of these reports, also policy briefs, is actually to say, okay, we have this academic knowledge, but how can we ensure that this reaches the right people? So how does this reach policymakers, decision makers in the militaries? And there, of course, I'm under no illusion to assume that these people are going to go down and read my 25-page articles. So rather than the idea here was to produce much shorter versions of kind of the main autonomous arguments in a summary format and an accessible language. And part of that was also kind of contributing to submissions of evidence because, as I said, due to the salience of the topic, more and more international and national policy processes became invested in studying AI in the military domain and also its potential governance. So then there were these opportunities to also share autonomous knowledge with these communities through these submissions of evidence, for example, at the UN General Assembly. Write a couple of nice pictures just for dissemination and impact. And just to continue this theme, so autonomes, and again, not just me, but also the whole team also made a great effort to contribute in kind of wider dissemination ways to kind of spreading the word about the autonomes types of knowledge. So we delivered a lot of kind of invited presentations to both academic and policy events, again, kind of underlining this kind of dual quality that for me the autonomes project have. And then I was also invited to serve as an expert in various multi-stakeholder initiatives dedicated to the governance of AI in the military domain. So, I mean, just to maybe create some more worry in this room, at the moment there is no specific governance, right? So there is no top-down governance addressing the challenges raised by AI in the military domain. We, of course, have international humanitarian law, but that is kind of generally applicable rather than addressing the specific challenges. So there have been a lot of kind of initiatives trying to address this issue, and this is also some of the ones that I've been part of. And I think, given how much I've talked about kind of societal impact and policy orientation now, it will not surprise you that I also applied for a proof of concept grant, which is an ongoing project at the moment. It basically takes this kind of assumption that current practices lead to diminished human agency, but in a way these practices could theoretically also be used to kind of strengthen or sustain human agency when we use AI in the military domain. So this is really what this kind of project tries to do. And this is already my last slide. So now I'm reflecting a bit on my career. I tend to speak a bit too fast. I hope it was okay. Where I kind of zoom out, right, and kind of look at kind of the last 5 years and where I am now and where I started. So I mean, these are just some highlights, right? But I mean, I think the main thing really for me is that this ERC grant gave me the opportunity to really deepen this particular research agenda. And I applied for this grant in 2019. Back then, if you talked about AI in weapon systems, it was a bit kind of science fiction, right? So there were always references to the Terminator. I think we can all determine that this has changed over the last five years. I'm not saying it changed because of the project, you know, so obviously there are world events, but I think what the project really enabled me to do is to kind of build up, right, and this kind of knowledge base that I can now use to actually have an impact both academically and societally. Then during that time I also became a full professor at my institution, and as a couple of other grantees have already talked about as well, I believe also the ERC was quite foundational in terms of allowing me to be competitive for other major prestigious research grants. So in 2023, I was awarded a Sapere Aude DFF research grant for a project on human-machine interaction and human agency. So you see a theme emerging there. And then also just earlier this year, my work was recognized with the Elite Force Research Prize. So I think in terms of, based on my experiences, I can really think that the ERC really has been career-changing for me. I think it's no overestimation to say that. And I think these are two reasons personally for me that I think this has been the case. So first is time, right? Time is always the most precious resource that we have as human beings and as researchers. And when I applied for the ERC, I had a regular kind of teaching research position. I was kind of just starting out as a senior lecturer back in the UK, actually, at that point. And being awarded this starting grant really gave me the opportunity to dedicate a substantive amount of time to this agenda and also to work with the research team. I should also add that when I started the project, I just returned from maternity leave. So I think timing-wise, it could have also not come at a better moment, right? Because again, there's this basic challenge, right, around combining our different identities and roles that we have. So time, I think, is a major factor, and then also visibility. And I think we've also heard about this already, that I think my career trajectory after the ERC really is good evidence of the increase in visibility that such a prestigious grant brings with it. And I think being an ERC grantee really allows you to stand out and draw attention to your research agenda in ways that really greatly facilitate all kinds of networking and new connections being made. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce a partial hospital-based scientist at the capital region of Denmark and partial university-based scientist at the Technical University of Denmark, my colleague Tim Dyrby, who's a consolidator grant holder.
Thank you, Søren. Good to see all of you, and thank you for coming and talk a bit. So I actually want to put you or invite you into the machinery where I'm now halfway through this ERC grant. So this is not a new idea. This is an idea I got in 2015 where I started applying for this as a starting grant. But it was really hard to convince people of the idea. So it took many years to develop the idea to get through. But in 2021, I get into the interview that I actually give this award. So the story starts here. So we have a neuron in the brain, and this is the input and then the output. And this part here is the axon. It's wrapped with this fatty myelins around, and then it has a diameter. And the speed along here communicate these different brain regions in the brain. And the speed here is determined by the geometries of this axon and this myelin here. So we have known that for a long time, and we can measure the speed here. But what I actually want to do is to do it with an MR scanner, low resolution clinical one. So we can already do today some kind of this mapping. So this is purely mathematical models showing this pathway through. So this is actually reflecting the axons here, a bundle of these. And we can also detect with a clinical scanner these attacks from the diseases. But the idea here is actually that we want to look into this hypothesis that these pathways here is not just one highway. It is actually several lanes of conduction speed. So they have different speed. Some are fast, some are slow. And also the thing is that when these diseases attack, they attack not only on these axons here, but also on the myelin, which is the factor that boosting this conduction velocity. So all this I want to image with an MR scanner. So how this is done? So we have a brain. Normally it's actually inside the skull. But here we took it out. So we have MR scanners here. I'm working on a preclinical scanner, but it's all translated to human. So we acquire some images. We tune the MR scanner to sensitive to these microstructural features in micrometer range that we want to extract. We have a model, and this is an axon model. So and the knowledge we know from there is coming from what we have here from histology collected over many years. Then we have our model, and we fit it to this data set, and then we get a map out here. The problem is that what we have here is that the brain here is in 3D. The MR scanner is imaging things in 3D. Of course, the neuron is in 3D, it's an object. Our model is therefore in 3D, but our knowledge here is in 2D. We simply don't know how these structures look like in 3D. So how can we actually map these models here we need to do? And this is what we want to do. So we want to translate this into 3D. So we want to have a technology that allows us to look at this in 3D and actually to make a much more complex model. So we actually can detect more precise what is going on in the brain. So to do this, we use a synchrotron facility. And how this works is that you take your brain here, you take small samples, these are the small holes you can see here, this is below 1 millimeter, and you travel down here to this synchrotron facility. This is in Grenoble in France. The circumference here is about 800 meters, and you go down to this small beamline here, we have a facility to acquire intact 3D images. So you take your sample, they're tiny, prepare them, take them down here, and then this is Martin here putting into this machinery. And it looks like a space station, but the X-rays coming in through this part here, and you have your small tiny samples, where you put into a holder in a robotic arm, we take the sample and put it down here in the light. And then you just wait for the results to come out. It takes about 2 hours to get the results, and this is how it looks like. So this is actually the first human 3D samples intact brain tissue that has been produced. So the sample here is around 200 micrometers and 200 micrometers here, and it's all in 3D intact. So what we see here is the blood vessels, these here, and you can see them down here. They're coming out, so it's a 3D structure. This is in 2D just to make it easier. We have the glia cells. The glia cells are like the supporting system of the brain, ensure that everything is good. Then we have the myelinated axon, which are our interest. So this is these small round things here with the black dots around. So the black one is the myelin. They need to be tightly wrapped around the axons. So this is how things look like in a normal brain. Then we actually want to know, how does a disease look like? So we use an ALS disease, and this is a disease Stephen Hawking also did have. So it's a disease killing all your motor neurons. So you can actually not move anything. So you are just with yourself inside your brain. But what we actually want to see is what is happening with these axons. Why are they dying? So what we see here is that we have the axons here, and you can actually see when you follow them in 3D, you can see the myelin start to be patchy. So what we see here is the first indication of neuronal degeneration. So the axons are dying. We want to model this effect here. What we also see is all these cells coming out here, these white spots, they are massively more. There are many more of these, and that's because these glia cells are like the ambulances in the brain. So they try to keep the brain into a normal state to get it to run. Of course, it looks a bit noisy, but when you stare at it a couple of hours, then you see all the fine details. The thing is here that we are not satisfied just to have one volume. We take a number of these and stack them onto each other. So we get this extended view, so almost 1 millimeter here. And the reason why we want to have this large thing is that we have this low resolution MR. And we want to have this, this volume here represents more or less what we can see in 1 pixel in an MR scan. What we then do here is, I have postdocs. Could you please start the video? We have postdocs here handling these massive data sets because we are talking about 75 nanometer in isotropic resolution in 3D, and we need to handle this massive number of data sets. And that is completely new. We are doing this a new ground. So we have developed AI models to segment out these data sets. And here you see the yellow is the axons, the blue is the cells, and then the red is the vessels. So this is our first result. It's not really done yet. But this is what we are going to do to integrate into our MR scans models. So when you're actually getting this award here, first you need to define your leadership skills, right? So, and I have defined mine to be one team. For me, it is not only me, it's about the team. I'm nothing without these guys doing all these practical things and make it to work. So I really spent a lot of time to have the one team and to create the creativity. When you're recruiting personnel, then don't jump into this, just to recruit. You need to have the right people. If you don't get the right people, then you are challenged. You spend a lot of time on these things here. Work-life balance, these people come and work with you, they offer a lot. They do a lot to make your product good. So you have to pay back. And that is a lot of career development. How do you put them onto their next track in their career? So I spend a lot of time on this. But then you have these nice events with a team that really wants to do your ERC the best. So what are the next steps to keep the ball ringing? So I want to actually just show also what the ERC also allows to do. So this is something as like a side project. So this is my PhD student, Mayo. We have the small mouse brain here in an MR scanner, and then we actually map out here the fiber direction. So red is a right-left direction, blue is up-down, and green is front-back. So it's a 3D information here. The problem here is that we only have 125 micrometer resolution. But when we are working in one of these microscopes, then you can clear the brain, so it gets completely clear with some chemicals, so this is the same brain, and then we put into a microscope a light sheet. And then we make a new discovery that you can actually tune this in to make the same kind of images with the MR scan. But what we have out now is 4 micrometer resolution. So it's the same thing where you can actually now start to map out the brain connectome almost at the neuronal level. And what is cool here is there's no labeling here. Stay tuned. So, thank you a lot for this. So, again, I would like to show and highlight this is about the team. And then, of course, the ERC is the major funding, the backbone of my research to keep the things on, but are also topping up with other kind of fundings supporting this research. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And now for our last speaker of this session, Katrine Juhl Andresen, who's a professor at Aarhus University, who will tell us about her synergy grant.
Yes, thanks a lot for inviting me to present my research today. I'm very happy to be here, and yeah, it's been some impressive talks so far, so I hope I can conclude in a more or less proper way. But I'm happy for presenting my project today, and it's a ERC synergy grant project called Subnautica. And this is a project that I undertake in collaboration with the 3 other PIs. So my name is Katrine Juhl Andresen, and I'm a professor in marine geophysics at the Department of Geoscience. So when I do field work, I go to the sea with research vessels and emit acoustic pulses, and with that I can look into the subsurface and see how the geology and how the substratum looks like. The other PIs in the project is my colleague Professor Vincent Gaffney from University of Bradford. He's an archaeologist. Then I work with Dr. Svea Malstedt from the Lower Saxony Institute for Historical Coastal Research in Wilhelmshaven. She's also an archaeologist, and then I'm also working with Dr. Peter Moe Astrup from Moskov Museum. So he's also an archaeologist, and this project is very much about joining forces between geoscience and archaeology. And we started the project in April 2024, so we are not so far in the project yet. So I'm not presenting a lot of results today, but I'm more presenting the main idea of the project and what we hope to achieve. Yes, so let me take you back in time. Geoscience is about looking at how the planet looked like back in time. And approximately 20,000 years ago, we were at the end of the last ice age. And at this time, the global sea level was around 130 meters lower than today, and that meant that there was a lot of land area that was exposed, which is now submerged. And in this land area, there was a lot of opportunities for our early ancestors, Stone Age people, to occupy these land areas. And there's a lot of things that we don't know yet about these submerged landscapes, and still, these landscapes were quite critical for how the humans dispersed globally. So there's a lot of potential in investigating these areas. And for Subnautica, we focus on the North Sea region, which is an area that used to be a land for thousands of years, and we have good reason to believing that this land was occupied by early humans. And when we call this area for Doggerland, it's basically an unknown area. But as you can see on this slide, there's a lot of findings from the late Paleolithic and Mesolithic periods, both on land, that is illustrated by all the finds in the UK region. And we also have some evidence from the submerged landscapes, and you can see here that Denmark in particular stands out. We have good potential for investigating submerged settlements. But if we take a look in the North Sea region, we can see there's only a very few findings of archaeology, and this is what we call chance finds, so it's just something that fishermen troll up by chance, but they find different spearheads and different work bones, and so there are strong indications that this area was actually occupied by humans. And if we can start to investigate this area, and if we can actually find the settlements that we believe are out there, we have a huge potential to actually get to know a lot about our early ancestors, and also because we are going to more deep water, we are moving further back in time, and we have a potential to open or reveal a very old chapter in our history. So that's the idea and the potential of studying this region. Yes, and then you might say, what is the challenge, and what is the major question? You can ask, why have we not yet found the evidence of the settlements in Doggerland? It's something we've been trying to do for many years in the different research groups. But it turns out that it's a really difficult task, and one thing is that Doggerland, the North Sea region, is quite large. It's a big area, it's a huge area. We are in deep water settings where it's difficult to investigate archaeology. So yeah, it's like finding the needle in the haystack, but the problem is that we don't even know where the haystack is. So this is really something we are working on. And also there's a lot of geological processes that has happened in this area. Now the submerged settlements, if they're preserved, they're buried between marine deposits, and also we have the risk of the relevant strata being eroded. So we are really dealing with this Goldilocks problem, you might say. We need to find out the areas where the humans were. We need to be able to detect them, and also we need to be able to access them in order to study the important material. And we need that material to be preserved. So it's not an easy challenge, and I think that's also why we got this synergy grant, because we really need to combine forces to solve this problem. So we need to learn more about the landscape and environment. How did it evolve? And this is what I can do as a geoscientist. I can map out the landscape. I can investigate how was temperature, what kind of vegetation was there in the area. And the archaeologists can then tell us about how did the humans behave. We don't really know much about our ancestors. And then we also need to be able to analyze huge amounts of data. There's actually quite a lot of geophysical data in the North Sea region, so we need to use the benefits of AI and machine learning. So that's in essence our project. And we have these three objectives. So we want to identify the interesting areas. We want to develop new methods for which we can characterize these areas or these underwater sites. And of course, we want to investigate them, get some samples and learn more. And hopefully we'll be able to say, how did the landscape and environment change during the flooding of this former land area, and how did the humans respond to it. And flooding and sea level rise are also kind of problems that we are looking into at the moment. So in that sense, we also touch upon more up-to-date problems. Yes. So we started the project 1.5 years ago, and as I said, we don't have many results yet. But what we are doing is we are taking an approach to going from the landscape scale to the site scale, and gradually building up the information. And we will do that by looking at different input data and combining these, and also using this machine and deep learning approach is a key component in the project. And the aim is also to make a simulation of how the landscape evolved, and our goal is to have it on a daily basis or maybe an hourly basis, because this is when we can start putting people into the landscape. Yes, just a concluding slide about how it is to hold an ERC grant, and we were asked to reflect a bit on how does it affect our research and our discipline, and this is, as you can see, stuff that has already been mentioned in several versions by the other presenters. But if I should say something about how it affects my research, is again. The ERC grants are substantial. It's a lot of funding. It's a good time period for a Synergy grant. We have a 6-year period, so we have time and funding to actually build up a research infrastructure and do complicated field work, which is what we need to be able to do in order to solve the challenges in our project. And then it's also a project that supports indirectly the green transition and also offers opportunity for policy guidance. We heard Frede talk about offshore wind farms, and in the North Sea region is, as we all know, under pressure nowadays. We want to use it for a lot of different purposes. For instance, constructing offshore wind farms so we can get a lot of electricity. And with this project, we hope to be able to better identify areas that we need to take care of. Can we say this area we should probably not construct things because this is an area with a really high cultural or really high potential for cultural heritage. And in other areas, we can say, go ahead, construct as much as you want. There's nothing of interest here. So in this case, or in this way, we can also advise on the marine spatial planning, and that's this, for me, very rewarding also to be able to touch upon these sites. And a bit about how, as a geophysicist working with archaeologists, natural science meeting social science, so far it's been very smooth and very rewarding. And it's always, as a scientist, at least that's my opinion, rewarding when your discipline can be used for things that you have maybe not foreseen when you started your research many years ago. So for me, really, it's very rewarding to be able to put people into the landscapes that I can reconstruct, and also think about how has the geological processes influenced how the human lived and acted in an area. And also with this project, I'm really stretching or squeezing my methods to the limit. How small detail can I see with the reflection seismic method that I work with, and how much indirect information can we actually extract from the geophysical signals. And the final one, influence on my career, as has also been mentioned already, is a really good opportunity for me to grow my research leadership skills, and also, as has also been mentioned, it's a great opportunity to support the early career researchers that I have in my group, and also give more opportunities to them. And then with this ERC Synergy grant is really one of the greatest opportunities to be able to work interdisciplinary and also intersectoral. We are both museums, research institutions, and universities. And I think this is also important that we have funding schemes that support such research. Yes, and with that, I will just leave the slide and say thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to welcome the speakers back and to take a seat and hopefully also take a question or two, possibly more. And there should be people with microphones that we can guide around. Thank you so much. So while they sit down, does anyone have a starting question for the panel? Okay, in the meantime, I will sort of get started and say that, Peter, you sort of noted that ERC grants are, you need big infrastructure. And Frede, you noted that, you're doing this 13-year project, and I mean, you have a boat. So a basic question is an ERC enough? Are the grants sufficiently sized to carry out the work you need to carry out?
It's a very leading question. I think the obvious answer is no. I think I can speak from in my own research field. Obviously, I mean the infrastructure requirements becoming so significant that ERC grants are good seed investments for infrastructure, but it's certainly not supporting an endeavor like what I have been building up. So I would, in my area, strongly welcome also more differentiation and also bigger grants.
But should this be like field specific?
That's probably a natural way to go, because I imagine in other areas it can be quite different. What should you use all this money for if you don't have cryostats and lasers, and also people that need to maintain this infrastructure? So yeah, so probably so.
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think maybe my answer is yes, partly, because for the ERC grant you can apply up to a 10 million frame, and then there's additional funding you can apply for if you do fieldwork in remote areas. Or in my case, offshore fieldwork, it's very expensive to have these research vessels. So in that sense, I think there are considerations about difficult or costly fieldwork conditions that the ERC are providing solutions for.
Anja?
Yeah, so I would say that you will never get money enough. So, but I think what I see the ERC is really also an opportunity to kick off new people, new flagships coming up with ideas and to develop. And that is what I see the ERC is giving. So of course I could also spend more money. But it actually allow me to build up what I need to take the next step.
Right, that's a good point. Anja, for the last
Yeah, yeah. So of course, it's easy to say that we always would like more money. So that's true. But I also think that there is a need for, of course, the ERC grants to grow with time, follow inflation, and all these things. And I think that is being looked at now, and it's coming. But that's very important, because I can see at the time where, from when I got my starting grant and then up to when I got my advanced, I think the size of the grants had not changed a lot. So if you looked at what you could actually get for it, it was actually somewhat comparable, because of the time and how things have, the cost of doing science is just has increased dramatically. And it's of course important that the ERC grants follow that. And one relation to instruments and infrastructure, one could also think of that as an alternative funding scheme. Maybe there is some need for thinking about funding into this, so that you fund bigger structure rather than instruments that follow the individual researcher, which I think overall is maybe not the most sustainable way to build these things.
I want to switch to the audience.
Yeah. I'm Gert Gigerens, ERC Vice President. Question to all of you. What can we, the Scientific Council, do to make your life as researchers even better?
Peter, go first.
Oh, I should start. So I think for research activity like mine, it's really this. The long haul here is really an important thing. So extending 5 years is a long time, but even longer time funding would make a huge difference, because infrastructure, it's true. I mean, we're not buying it exclusively on ERC grants, and I also don't think we should. But it's tabletop stuff that we do. So there will be elements of equipment being bought, and there the 5-year time frame is actually short. It's long compared to many other funding schemes, but even longer. I mean, that would be my dream scenarios. So and of course still keep me, competitive. You need to make sure that I'm not just becoming laid back, but longer instruments. In Denmark we have the DNF, the 10-year funding programs have been amazing with that patience. Sole focus on excellence, and once you're in, They really also support you, but also keep you on the toes, which they should. I think that the DNF has been, the 10 years is a key thing there.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think maybe we could also do more around networking and collaborating among ERC grantees, because I think sometimes it's hard to be fully aware of the full landscape of funded projects that are maybe of direct relevance to your particular project. And I think sometimes maybe we're missing out on opportunities to interact with each other. I mean, I know, of course, the ERC has this scheme of also allowing visiting researchers from other national science funded projects. So my project also hosted an NSF-founded researcher at some point. So, but I think why not also do that same kind of thing within the ERC-funded group of projects? I mean, maybe there is something that I have not been attentive to, but I think that would be very valuable.
Yeah, I think running a project, as much flexibility as possible. As when you first get the money, as much flexibility. Of course, we should not, let's say, totally change directions, but as much flexibility. I know there are some of the schemes maybe have lump sum now, more flexible, but as much flexibility because we could come in a situation, for example, due to the people we hire or the people opportunities we have to get and so on. As much flexibility there, I think, can make a very, very big difference along the way. And then I also agree, also, a longer duration can also do that. You can maybe go in directions you would not do because you have to end a project. So that could also be a good thing.
I know you're all standing in line. I want to switch to the audience back again.
This member of the audience is Maria Leptien, ERC president. I thank Geert, but before I get to my question, first of all, I thank you for acting as a cheerleader. If you don't like to be an ambassador, actually, you'll be amused. We did consider in the Scientific Council the term cheerleader for these people.
I would have loved that.
We did sort of think that might give the wrong connotations. Anyway, so you'll have to be put up with being an ambassador for, if not an ambassador of the ERC. That's important. I also want to, I thank Geert for his question, and I want to comment on a couple of things. Longer term, you will see that we will be announcing very soon, as a consequence of President von der Leyen and Macron's Choose Europe initiative, for which they have given the ERC some extra money, longer-term grants. We will be calling them ERC Plus grants. They'll be for 7 years and for up to 7 million. Now, don't all get overexcited immediately, because there will be only 30 of those to be awarded. So they're going to be 30 times as competitive as the existing grants. I don't want to put you off. Go for it, but remember that. Inflation adjustment, that will come if the Commission manages to give us the doubling that they're now talking about, which is by no means guaranteed. So we'll rely on you guys to fight for that, to fight for the next budget, to fight for the ERC. Flexibility, you have absolutely maximum flexibility. If it's just a little deviation, you just do what is best. If it's a major deviation, you contact the agency, and we have agency staff here. You can ask them about it. You will be granted a redefinition of your grant if it makes sense. Usually we don't even need to go back to the panel. So it's there. That should be known. And the networking, great idea. This actually also came up last night, and we've written it on our agenda. We'll be discussing it with the council, what we can do. Not only networking among the grantees, which is very important, which would be great and might generate even better idea and an even higher added value for Europe, but also with industry, which I think would be great, because then there is an outlet for all these, or potential outlet for all these ideas. And that's where I want to get. That's what my actual question was going to be about. And thank you for permitting me to make these comments. Several of you have pocket grants or have spin-outs anyway or have big companies. And Peter, you mentioned that you're hoping that your company can stay in Europe. What are you going to do about that? Because we heard yesterday from Sir David that his company, Solexa Illumina, he was not able to keep that in Europe.
Yeah.
Partly because, he wasn't there to push soon enough. So what do we all do about that? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, maybe you won't be amused by my answer. So my answer is, who am I? I'm just the founder. I'm just part of this company. I have a seat on the board. But of course, when things grow, it's not me who will sit and decide. You can ask me, what do I want? And that is very, very clear. I would like to keep this in Denmark, Europe, grow or scale up. I do a lot in working on this strategy right now. How do we actually grow to remain in Europe? I work on that personally because this is really my ambition for us. Because I think it makes a lot of sense. I really want to do it, but also it really makes sense for our growth that we can grow in this environment, we can exploit this environment. But there are other forces when we get into the commercial world, and you can guess some of them. Who am I to that's just what we should understand, of course, when these things grow, that we are also baits for bigger investments, and I think we are one of them. I think I always I don't want to make it too dramatic, but actually always I talked about the hype in Denmark. I didn't only mean it in a negative way. The hype also means excitement about quantum. We are good in quantum, and we're excited about quantum, and the politicians are really excited about the opportunities we have in quantum in Denmark. And I always tell them, at least I have said it, that this can happen. And I think this is really important for me to say also. How do we keep these hardware infrastructure in Europe? It's not a trivial exercise. We're not used to it. We have an opportunity in quantum. The answer is, of course, to invest in the infrastructure. The answer is also to invest in something that we are less good at maybe in Europe, and for good reasons. I mean, focusing, picking winners, daring to pick winners when it becomes technology, right? We are very democratic. We want it all. We want to go and win Olympic gold, but we can probably not win it all of it. And then you get into that exercise where you say, okay, I actually see here opportunities. This is a very difficult thing for us to do in Europe. Being aware of it, formulating it, working with that's what I personally do. But it's a challenging thing, and it's something I've spent a lot of effort and feel a lot for also.
Another challenge is keeping time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're already well across our time slot. The good thing is that there will now be a coffee break, and I do encourage you to also approach the speakers. But let's thank them once again.
Thank you to our cheerleader and the truly inspiring stories from our grantees. We will now have a 15-minute break, so please be back here 11:45. And you want to be back because we will hear from our three vice presidents of the ERC. So please be back here 11:45. Thank you. Yeah, welcome back, and please find a seat. We're a bit behind schedule, but I thought the last debate was so exciting, so we let it run a bit, and then also it's important to have a significant break. But now we will have the perspectives from our 3 ERC vice presidents, and they will each, in a very short way, share their perspectives. And I'm delighted to hand the floor first to Gert Gigerenzer, who is the ERC Vice President for Social Sciences and Humanities. And then... Okay. And then Øystein, ERC Vice President for Physical Sciences and Engineering. And then Jesper Svejstrup, the ERC Vice President for Life Sciences. But first, Gert, please.
The human mind works with just about 20 watts. How can such an energy-saving device produce intelligence, intuition, and innovation? And also with about 10 bits per second. Migration and climate change are among the most pressing problems today. What lesson can we learn from history? And what should teachers do when their students write the essays largely with ChatGPT, Gemini, and other large language models? ERC research in the social sciences and humanities spans an extraordinary range of questions. And perhaps one of the most striking features and emerging trends is how boldly it crosses disciplinary borders. Take archaeology. The ERC has funded more than 200 archaeological projects, helping to fuel the field's most dramatic revolution since its birth. Archaeology has turned into a truly interdisciplinary science, merging genetics, chemistry, and history. One example made world news. You may have heard of that. Using AI combined with imaging techniques, researchers examined the charred Herculaneum papyrus scrolls buried under volcanic ash after the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. They discovered, and that was in the news, that Plato was buried in a secret garden in the Platonic Academy of Athens, as well as details about Plato's last night. That he did not like the music played at his deathbed. Now, there were more important discoveries, but that's what hit the news. Overall, among all top impact publications in archaeology, about 58% acknowledge ERC funding. Another emerging trend with a strong ERC footprint is the study of how we share and reuse resources. The social sciences have contributed to breakthroughs in understanding the sharing economy, best known from Airbnb and Uber, and collaborations with the natural sciences, or between the natural sciences and the social sciences, have advanced our understanding of the circular economy, turning waste into value. And ERC-funded projects have contributed about over 70% of the seminal papers in that area. And I would like all of you to look into individual projects. We have heard a number of excellent examples today, and if I may add another one from this university that I found interesting. So among the many fascinating projects is forest diet, led by Laura Rasmussen at the University of Copenhagen. Her team found that reforestation, that means planting trees, is not only good for the planet, but also to reduce poverty in Africa. And finally, let's have a quick look at one of the big questions we face today. How will humans interact in the future with AI? And questions that emerge in the last years is, why is it that generative AI is so successful, but predictive AI not? So predictive AI is like predicting recidivism or predictive policing, which is mostly marketing hype. And a related question is, can insights about how our brain works, this efficient brain, help to make AI better in these areas of predictive AI? And we have good recent example that here less is more. The ERC has funded more than 1,000 AI-related projects. And for instance, Rachel Gibson at the University of Manchester studied how digital technology and micro-targeted social media reshape the political discourse. But even in the age of targeted political messages, slogans like "Make America Great Again" still work as a collective, totally unspecified message. And AI's impact on humans goes further. You are aware of the studies that show that indicate that teenagers' rates of depressions and self-harm have soared in the order of 100% between 2010 and 2020, a phenomenon dubbed the great rewiring of our brains. And some of you may experience this every day. It may be the first natural experiment on how digital environments change mental health. And AI is reshaping the ERC itself. Now, for instance, we experience a dramatic increase in submissions from this year to last year. And the hypothesis is that quite part of these resubmissions are now, and this increase is due to the tireless new co-authors. That is the use of large language models. And we will probably see this increase going on. And we are faced with how should we deal with that? Will we end up in a situation where most of the projects are written largely by large language models, and then we are being forced that most of the reviewers use large language models? And what will the future ERC grantees, will there still be humans? So let me end. Let us remember why research in the social sciences and humanities matter. It's not only about technology and economic growth. It's about the social fabric that holds Europe together, our communities, our health, our diversity. The social sciences and humanities have always been and will continue to be a source of wonder, value, and inspiration, helping us to understand and add beauty to the human experience. Thank you for your attention.
I need to bring my tea because my voice is weak today. Dear friends and colleagues, dear ERC grantees, and not least dear future ERC grantees, which I hope get inspiration from being here today. The high status of the ERC is anchored in our ability to attract the best talents in Europe with our most innovative ideas. But the status also depends on the respect we have in the research community based on the expertise of our review system, our reviewers, and the feedback given to applicants. My job as a vice president, my main job as vice president, is to ensure that we find the right and the best quality of our reviewers. This election is based on input from experts in the scientific council, but also expertise in the agency and by contact with the community. And I would also encourage you who are grantees to take part in this and be available for our panels. It's very important, at least not because our system is under stress, which Gert just talked about, and I will come back to. ERC funding is allocated to the domains by demand. And 40% of ERC funding is in the physical sciences and engineering. So the 40% of the demand from the scientific community comes into us, and we cover 11 different panels that needs to be staffed for every new call. We are in the process of evaluating and reforming the way we assess what we actually deliver back to society, so we can provide better information to those who fund us on the impact from our research on issues like competitiveness, building of research strongholds, and excellent careers. I think in the community, at least many that I speak to, there is a misunderstanding that the ERC does not fund applied research. And the fact is that we look for bold and groundbreaking ideas, independent on whether they are more theoretical or deal with applications or instruments, as long as they transgress knowledge barriers. That is the criteria. It's the idea of a transformative impact, regardless of where that is felt, that is important. And that is what we mean by frontier research. In the PE domain, we actually have 2 separate panels solely devoted to engineering. Our ERC projects deliver patents, and a high percentage are used in patents. And for each euro invested, the ERC, with its focus on excellence, delivers substantially more patents than top-down schemes in the European funding scene. We are also keen to investigate other aspects of our impacts on European competitiveness, for instance, through the training of excellent expertise. The proof of concept scheme enables the best minds to take their ideas towards the market, as also documented by the impressive success of ERC grantees in obtaining continued funding from the European Innovation Council. This excellence and bold ideas are fundamental for Europe's economy. The return on investment is high and could be even higher, and based on the evaluations, we could fund 40% more top projects than we do because of the lack of funding. I would also mention here the direct impact on societal issues and the major societal challenges, for instance, by empowering innovations to tackle the transformation to a low-carbon society, and research that directly informs and assesses our policy development in mitigating climate change and our resilience to climate hazards, which is my own field of research. A few words about current trends. Gerd alluded to this, that there is an ongoing high rise in the application numbers that we receive. And our forecast in the ongoing calls is for a 20 to 30% increase compared to earlier years. And as Gerd said, we don't know exactly why this is happening, but we have some suspicion that he mentioned. But this, of course, creates a major challenge to our evaluation system and to uphold success rates. The growth is in several disciplines, but in our field, there's less growth in the more fundamental aspects of natural sciences. For the last years, we were afraid that, especially for the advanced grants, the application rate was going down in fundamental physics and chemistry. This appears to have changed now with the increase we see. But there is more pressure from the more there's less pressure in the fundamental aspects of physical science and physics and chemistry, for instance, than elsewhere. We monitor and analyze the developments in the field and see how it moves by looking at what sort of questions come up in our proposals. So one change that we have noted, and Gerd was also using his opportunity to use the same argument that I'm coming with, but that's okay. It's similar across the domains. The use of artificial intelligence and machine learning is now evident across almost all proposals across the whole domain of natural sciences. This started several years ago and was an early warning of what was to come. We could see this earlier in the ERC than many places elsewhere because our scientists, who are at the forefront of research, also are at the forefront of taking on board new methods and ideas. And so ERC has been fundamental for developing AI in Europe, both the fundamental aspects of the technology, but also, not least, in the application of AI in research. Within computer science, about half of our projects are now on the fundamentals of AI. And we are in Scientific Council discussing if we need to establish a separate panel on the fundamentals of AI to accommodate this proposal pressure. Yet, we do not wish that our panels are too narrow and specific. We need broad competence because of another trend that we observe, namely the increase in interdisciplinary research that draws on insights and methods from various fields, both inside the domain of physical sciences, but also across to the other domains. Not only in the synergy grants, but also in normal grants. And I could say similar things for quantum science as I did for artificial intelligence. This is something that is very noticeable. Many policymakers have become aware of the high need for top-level expertise in the STEM fields in Europe, and that Europe is lagging behind on the global scale in terms of skilled STEM scientists and expertise. The best way to counteract this deficiency is to create top-level scientists through the ERC, as this will have direct impact and create excellent innovative training environments to fill this increasing gap. So we hope this message bears through in the negotiations in front of the next framework program, FP10. So to all the grantees and the future grantees here, thanks for listening, and good luck with your work and your proposals.
All right, I'm always the last speaker. So the challenge is we are like herding tomcats. It's impossible to know what they're going to do. It's impossible to hurt us, so we haven't coordinated anything. So my challenge is always to say something different. I'm going to be very brief, not to repeat what people have said already. I want to say a few words about some very important reasons why ERC matters so much on the international science scene. Words that might have been said before, but I will perhaps rephrase them a little bit to suit my purpose. Now, ERC is not just about access to funding. This is really important. Instead, it's about being part of these interactions, collaboration, workflows, and importantly, competition across the European nations. And about drawing on the absolutely outstanding science expertise that the ERC has from so many outstanding panels. And I think that Øystein very clearly outlined this for us. The panels are outstanding, therefore we make outstanding decisions. Indeed, although words such as elite and excellence and winning have additionally not have an easy life in Jantelov, Denmark, one of the fantastic things about the ERC is that it has succeeded by unashamedly focusing on excellence. We simply only fund the very best, independent of country or university or gender and so on. We simply fund the best science. Instead, we realized that only learning from the best and measuring yourself against the very best can you reach your full potential. And that means that you are being an integral part of the international science community. So this is what the ERC also provides. People have mentioned it before, but I want to reiterate it here. It's a real stamp of approval. You made it on the big stage if you get an ERC grant. It matters in Europe, it matters for you on a national stage as well. People know what the ERC is and what it means to get an ERC grant. So if you have a great idea for a research project, please do apply to the ERC. There appears to be this misconception that the ERC is so cutthroat competitive that it's not worth applying unless you have a crazy good CV. This is simply not true. We want our researchers to be excellent, that goes without saying. But we first and foremost look at the quality of the science, the quality of the idea. And we have these expert panels that can actually look straight through that. They will know whether something is good, not whether it's hyped, not whether it's up in the day, but whether it's good. And that's really important. There's also sometimes the misconception, indeed, that one needs to work on something new and hot to have a chance. Actually, the panels are lots of elderly researchers because we need experience to see the good stuff. And they don't fall for the hype. They don't care about hype. They look at quality. So this is really important. They can't give two hoots about whether something is more hot than something else. They just look at the quality, the originality, and they want you to take chances. And I thought we saw some very good examples today of high-risk, high-gain research. We can see this is worth doing, but we can also see that it can fail. That's okay. You propose something that's high-risk, the panels will love it. This is really important. So give it a go, please apply, especially if you're a scientist in the life sciences. And I say that with full disclosure of bias. Thank you.
So thanks a lot to our three ERC vice presidents. So we will now turn to our panel debate, and that's on how to translate basic research into impact, the Danish model. And it's my pleasure to hand over to our moderator, Professor Thorstein Persson, member of the ERC Scientific Council and Professor of Economics at Stockholm University, who will guide the discussion. And we will end at 1:15. We are 15 minutes behind. We'll end at 1:15, just that you know it, all of you. Thank you, and please.
All right. Welcome to the discussion. Let me first introduce a very distinguished panel. We have Dr. Dahl Jensen, who is a geophysicist and holds a chair at the Niels Bohr Institute in paleoclimatology. She also holds a Canada chair, and she's also the director of the Danish National Research Foundation. How time suffices. We have Jan Egebjerg, who has a background in neuroscience. He is now the Vice President for Research Grants and Prizes of the Lundbeck Foundation, which is one of the biggest foundations in Denmark. Annemarie Falktoft, originally a Master of European Literature from Cambridge. Now, as you saw her in the role of Deputy Director of the Danish Agency for Science and Higher Education. Please. Søren finance scholar, professor at the Copenhagen Business School, and now a Dean of Research at that institution. And then our own president, Maria Leptin, former director of EMBO, and a microbiologist and an immunologist at that. So our theme is how to translate research in real-world impact, the Danish model, and we speak about the Danish model and maybe the European one. I'd like to expand on the other part of the theme just a little bit. So translate suggests a pipeline from basic research to applications, where the two are really opposite on a spectrum, and you can only hope for trickle down. This distinction was made by Vannevar Bush, as David told us yesterday in his talk. I would like to complement that with the view of Donald Stokes, American political scientist who has an interesting 1997 book, which relies on a richer two-dimensional view of the motivations of research. So in his view, we should distinguish research in a quest for understanding as such, discovery for short, and research in quest for usability, say invention for short. And in that view, we can take someone like Niels Bohr, he is the model of discovery as such, and we can take someone like Thomas Alva Edison, who's an example of inventions, pure inventions. But in this view, they are not opposites, they are orthogonal to each other. And what that means is that sometimes invention and discovery can happen jointly. The prime example of this in the history of science is perhaps Pasteur, who discovered the germ theory of disease and founded microbiology, but also made the invention of the first man-made vaccine and founded immunology at that. Moreover, each of these achievements grew out the other side of the spectrum. So the pure science on disease in animals project led to the vaccine, and an industrial process program to make vinegar and wine more effectively grew into the germs behind disease project. And yesterday we heard the same kind of message from Anne Lullier and David Cleverman, who sort of emphasized this interplay between discovery and invention. And in Anne's case, it was an infrastructure, the laser lab, that led to those interactions. And in David's case, it was the interactions between scholars at the brilliant research university that led to these interactions. And today, Peter Lodahl basically said the same thing. So from that perspective, if you're interested in real-world impact, an important question for research support is how we balance discovery and invention, and in particular, how we stimulate their interactions. Sorry for the lecture. Anyway, so we have a brief roadmap for the panel. Annemarie will start us off by briefly describing how the Danish model for research support looks like, its actors, its ecosystem, its advantages, and perhaps its disadvantages. And then the other panelists will comment on this presentation, especially from the viewpoint of this theme of real-world impacts. And then maybe Annemarie will have some rebuttal and another round of comments from the panelists, and then we will be out of time. So Annemarie, without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes, to explain the Danish research support system for those of you not Danish, I will start by saying that the Danish Research Council system is set up by 3 main research councils. They are all set up by law, independent from the political system, and governed by an independent board governing the functioning of the fund. 3 main funds. The one that Dorte is the chair of, the Danish National Research Foundation, funds groundbreaking research through an instrument with large centers of excellence. And as it has been mentioned earlier, they fund Center of Excellence up to a 10-year period. So this is really sort of groundbreaking, excellent research. The Danish National Research Foundation is the one that you can say is the most independent of the 3 research foundation. They receive their funds by a transfer of capital every 12-13 years from the political side, and then the fund itself is responsible for managing the portfolio of finances in order for the financing to last as long as it possibly can. Next to the Danish National Research Foundation, we have Independent Research Fund Denmark, which fund high-risk, curiosity-driven projects for individual researchers. They are also, as I said, independent from the political side, but they have a mix of some funds being completely sort of free, open-ended themes, and then some funds where the politicians have decided within which strategic areas the funds should be granted. And as the third fund, we have Innovation Fund Denmark, which was set up in 2014 as a merger of 3 prior funding instruments. And Innovation Fund Denmark funds cooperation between university, industry researchers, as well as funds small and medium-sized companies, their innovation projects, as well as startups, proof of concept funds, and so on. In addition to the 3 public funds, it is also important to mention that in Denmark we are benefiting from some large private foundation, Jan being from one of them. And they are really an important contribution to financing research in Denmark. There has also in the last couple of years been set up instruments to increase the cooperation between the public funds and the private foundations. And to not take up too much time, just a few more points. All the 3 public foundations, they fund projects based on excellence. They all fund where it's applications coming from researchers' idea or researcher industry ideas, but they all fund based on the excellence of the project. But then there's a mix whether it's only the scientific excellence or whether it's scientific excellence coupled with societal impact or impact for growth. And as I have been mentioning during my previous words, there's a mix between whether the themes that they have calls within, whether it's completely free, open-ended, or whether politicians have decided that so and so much funding should go to the green transition, so and much should go to life sciences, and so on. When we look to how the funding is then distributed from the political side to primarily the Independent Fund Denmark and the Innovation Fund Denmark, the politicians, they have negotiations every autumn on a rather large part of the national research budget. It's about almost 20% of the total Danish research budget, public research budget, that is politically negotiated every year. And the politicians, they really have what the debate is about is really this balance between free, open-ended research and the more strategically driven research, where politicians sort of go in and decide that within this and this field we really would like to see an acceleration of technological development. So that's one of the things. The other balance that they look to is the value is having enough finance to alongside the whole value chain. So having enough finance from the lower TRLs to the higher TRLs. And then I would say also increasingly they also have in view the balance between the core finance to the university, so like the basic funding for universities, and then the funds put out in free competitions, which is canalized through the three research funds. I would say, as a strength of the Danish system, I would say this the principle of open competition, the principle of excellence. I would also say that this political consensus that research policy is about balances. It's not about either or. I think that's also a strength of the Danish system. To point to a weakness, I would actually point to one of the things that was also mentioned by the vice presidents of the ERC Council. We see this increase at national level in the number of applications that our research funds receive, and so we see sort of lower and lower success rates. And so how do we sort of ensure in the future that we fund the best research, but not have too low success rates, so that we waste researchers' time in writing applications? Yes, I think.
Thank you. Good. So I invite comments from the rest of you, and why don't we start with the Danes and start with Dorte?
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to say in Denmark we only have knowledge. We have very few natural researchers, and this has been recognized at a very early point in Denmark. So the Danish National Research Foundation is actually formed in 1991, more than 10 years before the ERC program started. So now we give grants of about 14 million euros over 10 years. So it's very significant grants, and we give about 12 every second year. So we have between 40 and 50 centers. And what we see is that discovery to a high degree leads to applied science, to such a degree that 73% of our centers do collaborate with private companies. And while they are a center, they also attract more than 150% extra funding. So we very often see a few ERC grants within the Center of Excellence. So in that way, it's a really thriving place. And while excellence or long-term groundbreaking research is number one, then we also have two other things that we evaluate. We need a center leader that's capable of leading the center, but we also have a big emphasis on the team, which many of the speakers today, I was very happy to see they mentioned that as a criteria for their success. Because a very important part of what we do is also to grow the next generation. We need to have many young PhDs and postdocs and young researchers in the center. And a task for the center is also to make them grow so they become the next leaders for Denmark. And this leads me a little to think about, to talk a little about something that we haven't addressed so much. That's the Draghi report and the fact that Europe and maybe especially Denmark is falling a little behind on the the research scene. So we know, of course, it's a pressure from China and US especially. But why is Denmark, that was the Danish miracle for 10 years ago, why are we falling behind? And this is something we have investigated a lot in the foundation. And I think some of the points I could mention is that the universities are very pressed. There's really a big need for basic foundation to the universities so they can make the floor for the centers. But it also leads to postdocs and young researchers. They are pressed, and they don't have the opportunity to take risk-breaking projects, they need something that's more safe. And that's not the way to be surfing and groundbreaking. So another thing is that we've looked very much into how creativity is formed. And we find that group sizes of 20 to 30 people, where you can produce a very free and open atmosphere, so there's collaboration across the interdisciplinary in the centers, is the way to form young people and make more kind of inspiration for young researchers to form, and in that way bring up the next layer, which I think is very important to kind of to keep on the top. Maybe I haven't talked enough about the subject, but in general I believe that discovery leads to applications. This is what we see in our center. So I would recommend that we really support the discovery level.
Very good, Jan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so coming from a foundation that have bringing discoveries to lives, obviously translation is something that's really important in how we think of granting. So we have half of our grants is about $500 million a year, divided into programs focusing very much on talent and then bottom up, very much like the public systems. What we're also aware of is there's a lot of barriers. So on top of that, we develop grants where we help identifying ideas coming out of projects. And I think the thing about translation that's pretty inconvenient is you have to talk to people coming with different competences than yourself. And so being in life science, we have kind of an archetypical way of thinking of it in the value chain. So we know if biological discoveries in biology, what would it take to bring them forward? I mean, simple things like repeat them, because now the research you need to do, you have to convince others, like investors, that your data is correct. So we have instruments. We have just today actually announced a collaboration also with BII, one of the major institutions here, to pick up ideas from the competition, from the competitive grants. The other part we're becoming more aware of and looking at it is the barrier between the disciplines. I mean, the universities are divided to solve the very important task of training people, but that somehow, in many cases, bring different disciplines that really is needed to work together into different departments. And we can see, at least on our applications, that they don't necessarily talk so much together. So what we're increasingly thinking about is funding structures. I think translation, I mean, we understand how to pick it up from specific projects. I mean, as I said, we have the instruments, but really it's about an environment. It's building an environment where you have the colleagues that should take over the results and bring them forward. So from a value chain perspective, we always ask our grantees to say, oh, if your experiment is actually correct, if you have a positive outcome, who should benefit from that? And that seemed to be, I mean, most people say, oh, I write a paper and somebody would pick it up. I think it's an active process we try to stimulate, that people really think about, maybe I need to talk to a pharmacologist. What is the question that person would need in order to bring it forward? And so with our more strategic thinking, we try to bring them together. So we just funded a center in Parkinson, all super good basic researchers, for basic in sense that also do basic clinical research, bringing them together and so have people working on very fundamental protein structural studies to people that do clinical. And so so we believe in what we call the coffee machine principle, that you need to meet each other to do it and to break this barrier down. And I think that's a way of thinking of it. I mean, how can you stimulate it? And we also see when we go around that is environments that very often, I mean, there needs a certain volume of different competence really to bring the discoveries forward in the translational system. So that's an area that we have increasing focus on supporting, but again, always in collaboration with the universities. So we would always go to universities, say, what is high prioritized areas? What is areas that you think is important?
Thank you. Søren.
Yes, thank you. And maybe I'll take the university perspective, sort of thinking about our overall funding. And I think the last sort of 10 years, you can say that there's been somewhat of a drift from the understanding, the curiosity-driven to the usability-driven. And there's a few factors that has contributed to that. And I think I should also then sort of preface it by saying, sort of when we think about usability-driven, that depends on the perspective that you have. You can be the funder that has usability driven at the agenda, but from the researcher, so the funder may throw funds at a particular area because it has high promise because of competitive rates, but of course from the research perspective, that may be entirely curiosity driven. So what we've seen, Dorte talked about the basic research funding. In Denmark, universities get about 10 billion kroner per year in total in basic research funding. That has more or less stayed constant the last 10 years. It's about, and our overall funding has gone up quite a bit. EU funding has gone up from about 1 billion to 1.5 billion, 50% over that period. But the huge shift that we've seen is in the private foundations. And that has simply exploded, grown tremendously from, I think it's 2.2 billion, so it's 21% actually of our basic funds in 2014 till last year. It was 57%, I believe, of I think it's 5.8 billion kroner. So a huge growth, which has kind of has lots of positive effects on that. There are more funds in the system, but of course they're also tied up to specific projects. And so there can be a couple of effects here. It could be positive and negative. There can be a crowding out effect, and there can be a crowding in effect. I think we've seen some of the crowding in effect here. It was great to see some of the from the ERC grantee holders. We saw Novo Foundation, Willem Foundation, and they can support some of this, the ERC infrastructure, etc., the grants holders infrastructure. So, but it is also a concern, and I'm not sure if I'm taking your point here, but you lauded the Danish research model, research funding model in a speech earlier this year in Ireland. It's the Danish. It's quite stable and predictable. The funding it's becoming more unpredictable for the universities as well because it's a lot of this is competitive now. Maybe I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks. So Maria, how does all this look from an ERC and European perspective?
Well, there's many points I could pick up on. Some I already brought up in earlier questions. I think the independence one is interesting. So we heard creativity, group of 30 people. I think that's an interesting one we might want to talk about, because groups of 30 people as long-term teams, if they're satisfied, is great. Groups of 30 people, if they all think they want to become the group leader, is of course not sustainable. And that has led, at least in the life sciences, to long careers where people don't attain independence at a reasonable age. What did we hear today? Today or yesterday, somebody was talking about someone making their big discovery and implementing it at 26. That's great. You don't achieve that if you maintain research groups of 30 people for a long time. So that's one thing. But the other independence, I thought that was interesting, because independence is used as a sort of absolute good. And you immediately qualified independence. And of course it has to be qualified. So I think we have to think very much about how we define independence. The taxpayer is absolutely entitled, as you just said, to sort of fund different purposes of research. Research also means very different things, I'm going to research the hotels for my next holiday. People use research for that. I'm going to research how, the car works. So, and the taxpayer is entitled to define an outcome. In the case of the ERC, the outcome is excellent results that are not predicted. So when we talk about independence, I think what has to be maintained is the independence of whoever you hand over the money to for whatever purpose. And once it's in the hands of experts, you don't intervene. And that's, of course, what we see massively undermined in the US at the moment, where the president, after the purpose has been defined, after the funds have been allocated, suddenly changes. That's what's not. I think that is taboo, and that has to be prevented. And I think Denmark is still okay for that. And that's something where we at the ERC also have to make sure that that is maintained. The purpose is excellence and creativity. How that is done, once I think that's handed over to the ERC, needs to be in the hands of the ERC. And by one thing I didn't respond to this morning was the, I can't remember who it was who wanted to know their results and had to get into the portal. I was actually at the very same time, full disclosure, trying to get into my own email system, and the EC IT system wouldn't allow it. So we don't have independence there. So my apology is, I shouldn't apologize, the European Commission should apologize. But the independence in the implementation is also an important point. That was a lot of disjointed thoughts,
That's
but
all right. Yeah.
I think something we need to
Actually, so maybe we take another round. I think what Jan said about supporting the environments that are bigger than the center of excellence that the ERC can fund, or even the Danish National Research Fund can fund. And it requires collaboration with universities, but then there's a risk that it gets into no man's land, because university funding, often we say that it should be general and leave people the resources to do independent things, as was emphasized here. So how do we get at these environments at the meso level, which are productive and fertile grounds for this interplay between discovery and invention? And there are examples of that, but how can we foster such environments? Any ideas about this?
Well, for the Danish National Research Foundation, we are playing a lot with the idea of kind of working a lot with the other Danish foundations. For example, the Danish Innovation Fund, that we allow, innovation fund to come into the second period of the centers, and that way encourage innovation as early as possible. Maybe an innovation that's a little less strict than that is available right now, but it's not a negotiation we have started yet. So you're the first to peep into that.
Yeah. Annemarie, maybe you have ideas from the state side.
I think, as Dorte said, to further develop sort of the mix of funding instruments could be an interesting way to try to further develop the environment. And then I think we should also think about, because in the system as we have it now, people are given grants. And then the grants, they go on for the number of years that they go. And if you are as excellent as you are when you receive an ERC grant or a Danish National Research Fund grant, then it's okay to give time and say, okay, work for up to 5 years, then do a midterm review, and then continue work. But there could also be some projects where the collaboration doesn't work, where you have the wrong people, maybe especially if you have sort of university industry cooperation. If you start funding something and it doesn't work, then I think we should also, in respect of the taxpayers' money, be able to stop the projects. But it's a delicate balance, because you should trust the excellent researchers to have time and do their work. But on the other hand, we have such a large volume of activities going on that we should also be able sometimes to say, okay, this is not working, let's use the money for something else. And that balance is not easy, but I think it's important.
Very good. Jan, I interrupted you.
I think this model, I think looking at least the Danish universities, they have structures that's built around the teaching curriculum, and that's the structures, but that's not the same structures that's the ones you would use to try to tackle larger problems. And I think it's important with the individual independence, but translation is really not about independence, that's dependency on other competences. And that's what you could bring together. And so I think it's about thinking about dynamics, where areas where you focus on There could be a disease, bringing the competence together, but always think about how that could fertilize the surrounding environment and not make them like an ivory tower within the university. Whether that could be long term or short term. I mean, I think if you do structural things like that, it has to have a long-term perspective in doing that. And I think that's where we always see the really strong impact is when different disciplines meet, and often based on a basic discovery coming from independent researchers. But it's really the dependency that's important in bringing things forward. And I think it could be thought into. We have seen research structures in universities, and I think it could be more formalized in the system, bringing in from different institutes research and then build research units there.
Søren, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can also follow up a little on Maria's sort of alluding to sort of early career researchers, and I sort of mentioned that we are seeing more volatility in our funding. That makes it hard to hire into permanent positions, and of course we've seen postdocs, etc., that are going on, and that's sort of a big challenge in with these external funds, and we sort of. We need more stable funding to we are very concerned about getting the best opportunities for our young researchers, and that is not by being at postdocs for extended years of going on, and it's not that we have a good solution, but it's very much a focus of an area of focus for us.
Maria, you'll have the last words of wisdom.
Hard. So I don't think we have a problem with innovation. We heard from the panel that those people, I mean, they're ERC grantees, but that's fine. They come up with ideas for innovation, for translation. Not a problem at all. And we heard time and again that the trouble is scale up. And that's not something we can solve here. And it would be great if we could help. Again, the universities have often been blamed that they don't help the researchers. That may still be true in some cases, that they don't provide the right environment, but that's not really what universities are for. That's not where their expertise lies. The expertise for that step has to come from elsewhere. And you mentioned the ability to stop. I totally agree. And we hear many politicians calling for a DARPA-like structure. Everybody thinks DARPA is some sort of nirvana of creative translation and application and innovation funding. As usual, we Europeans, when we look and want what the others have, we forget the flip side of the coin, and that is exactly the stopping. So they can give you many millions, at the snap of fingers. They have the experts who do that, and they do have the experts. Those same experts can stop at 3 months' notice. We would never expect that, allow that here in Europe. We can't even have contracts for employing people whom we can kick out again at 3 months' notice. So, this is the wrong panel for discussing those problems. And I asked Peter this morning, what do you need, what do you want to make sure your company can stay in Europe and make the big bucks that our politicians are after? That's the member states, that's the European community that have to get together and solve the fragmentation of Europe to get there. It's none of us here have the recipe for that.
That may be right, but that runs into the long run versus short run problem that we discussed at length yesterday, but we'll solve that another day. So let me thank the panel with a big hand.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor Persson, and very interesting debate again. Thanks a lot. So let me thank all of our speakers, moderators, and participants here in the Hjørne Auditorium and also online. It has been a day of curiosity, frontier research, and exchange, and I do hope that you leave inspired with new ideas and new connections. So some of you, and you know who you are, have been invited to a reception at the 15th floor, But all of you, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.